All right. So we are in a new section called The Change Called Death. It'd be interesting to see what Peace Pilgrim has to say about death. So we're page 82 for those tuning in. Life is a series of tests. How do you feel about that? Do you find that to be true?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting because I rejected that idea years ago, and it it boils my blood every time. Because I figure who's testing who,
Mm.
Hmm.
right? I mean, who's life is a test. Well, who's testing who? And if someone says God is testing me, I was like, what is there about me that God doesn't know that he would have to test?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing. So God's not testing me.
Right.
That's a terribly bizarre way of thinking about God. Love doesn't test a partner. You know, if you tested your husband's loyalty, how would he feel when he found out? Right? If your husband tested you, right, left a penny on the floor to see if you vacuum properly. And then he comes home from work and he says, "Hey, the penny's still there. I tested you and you failed your vacuuming." Are you going to be like, "Oh, thank you so much for letting me know what I can work on. I appreciate that so very much." You're not. You're going to throw the dinner at him and kick him out of the house and say, "Come back when you're in a better mood." Right?
But
So this I
God tests the patience and tolerance. See how
I
patient we are, how tolerant we are.
does he not know already? Is he not
I
God?
don't think so. He keeps testing us all the
I
time. Then
no.
we learn.
I don't think he's not testing us. He's training you. He's
That's
not testing you.
through the test.
And no, he's not
See?
testing you. It would be God could not be God if he needed to
Hmm.
test.
Can you watch this? You can do. You
Yeah,
take.
God could not be God and test us. He can put stuff there to help us out and to improve us and to
Mm-hmm.
strengthen us, and that's what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a bizarre interpretation of a devotee to say that God tests us. And no, she's not saying God yet. She's just saying life is a series of tests.
Life tests us. The events in our lives test us, and we have a choice how we're going to react to that, right?
You could
Exactly.
React to
you
it.
yeah,
Exactly.
you could interpret it that way.
That's the
That's
way.
gonna that's gonna
Yes,
be that's
definitely.
gonna be a personal disposition
Right.
to think
Well,
that way. Because I'm not doing anything that I think warrants being tested for. I'm living, you know, and trying to find the beloved. And I don't know. It always just feels like that is not the God I'm falling in love with.
Is it
What's that?
is, is
We
it not that we are testing ourselves?
Possibly, yeah. We can test ourselves. Goodness, I would never do that. But yes, you could test yourself, and you could say. I mean, you could even say God is testing you if that's in line with your idea of God. But I think it violates love. I think someone testing you violates love because love always hopes, always believes, always trusts, according to the scriptures. And testing is a lack of trust. Testing is a lack of trust. Now, I'm not saying that God doesn't do things to us. I do. I think He puts these difficulties in our lives not to test us, not to see, oh, let's see if they win or fail. He puts things in your life to help you practice, to help you grow stronger, to allow you to be to grow, through the challenges of life. So I would say life is full of challenges. But seeing things as tests, I'm just passing on one of my own personal things, obviously. But I think it's good because it makes us think about the way God is. This is a very practical way. And if you start out with this idea that God needs to test me to find out where I'm at, one, you've denied his omniscience, you've denied the depth of his love for you, and you've misunderstood your relationship with the divine. That would be like that. A parent doesn't normally test a child, but if they do test the child, it's not going to see how they're going to fail. It's going to be to see how they could help better. It wouldn't be a matter of testing the child's competency. So I just don't like that idea. So I'm just making that known and sharing that with you. I think that a God of perfect love, it would be impossible for him to need to test somebody that he loved.
I think it's I think life, meaning like the karma, brings its own events in our life,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the mind that wants to evolve, thinks it's not evolved, and that mind then takes it as a test, as passing a judgment on oneself.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, and that's exactly what I'm pushing against.
Yeah.
So that doesn't happen. So we don't get an idea of like, oh, God tested me and I failed, and now I have failed in the eyes of God. No, that's going to open up a whole can of worms. That's going to mess up your life for a very long time if you think about the divine that way. So be absorbed in love, in a pure love, and and in a love that is you can count on in yourself. A love, because that's just not one of the components of love. That it would test you. It's a violation of relationship. So I just don't think that's what God is. Now, we can still interpret it that way. You're still welcome to look at it that way. It would just be a personal choice of interpreting it that way. But it doesn't seem like it would be helpful to me to think of God that way. So let's see where she's going anyway, before I get too...
Excuse me, Swamiji.
Huh?
Swami Vivekananda said, right, that have faith in yourself, be fearless. So, I mean, if we have faith in ourselves, we shouldn't feel we are being tested, right?
Well, yes. Well, I mean, that doesn't really have bearing on how you think about it. You can approach things as a test if you're a born academic and somehow that gets you going. That makes you study and makes you work harder and makes you do better. That could be helpful in that way. I'm just thinking about when I'm trying to understand love and when I'm trying to understand a divine love. I can get pretty far down the loop there, but if you throw at me something like testing, that God is purposely putting me in difficulty in order to test me, I'm like, well, that's interesting because that implies that he doesn't know something. Right? And that implies that he's not outside of time because he's going to have to check this test and he's going to have to take that period of time to judge me within those confines. So you can't say God is outside of time and space, right? He's in it and out of it, I guess. You could approach it that way. But I just throw that out there. I don't think that God tests us, and I don't think that I think that if you read it or if someone says it, it's going to be a personal interpretation of their relationship with the divine rather than a statement of the nature of God. Like I said, because in the definition of love given in the scriptures and the definition of God given in the scriptures, testing would be a violation of both of those. And so anyway, she says life is a series of tests, but if you pass your tests, you look back upon them as good experiences. I look back on all of my tests as good experiences, including the night I faced death in a blinding snowstorm. It was the first year of my pilgrimage and the most beautiful experience I ever had. I was walking in a very isolated section of the high mountains of Arizona, where there was no human habitation for many miles. That afternoon, there came a surprising snowstorm, out of season. I have never seen such a storm. If the snow had been rain, you would have called it a cloudburst. Never had I seen snow dumped down like that. All of a sudden, I was walking in deep snow and was unable to see through what was falling. Suddenly, I realized that the cars had stopped running. I suppose they were getting stuck on the highway and unable to pass. Then it got dark. There must have been a heavy cloud comer. I could not see my hand before my face, and the snow was blowing into my face and closing my eyes. It was getting cold. It was kind of cold. It was the kind of cold that penetrates into the marrow of the bone. If ever I were to lose faith and feel fear, this would have been the time, because I knew there was no human help at hand. Instead, the whole experience of the cold and the snow and the darkness seemed unreal. Only God seemed real, nothing else. I made a complete identification, not with my body, the clay garment which is destructible, but with the reality which activates the body and is indestructible. I felt so free. I felt that everything would be all right. Whether I remained to serve in this earthly life or if I went on to serve in another freer life beyond, I felt guided to keep on walking, and I did, even though I couldn't tell whether I was walking along the highway or out in some field. I couldn't see anything. My feet were my low canvas shoes. My feet in my low canvas shoes were like lumps of ice. They felt so heavy as I plodded along. My body began to turn numb with cold. After there was more numbness than pain, there came what some would call a hallucination, and what some would call a vision. It was as though I became aware not only of the embodied side of life, where everything was black darkness, bitter cold, and swirling snow, but also so close it seemed I could step right into it, of the unembodied side of life, where everything was warmth and light. There was such a great beauty. It began with familiar color, but transcended familiar color. It began with familiar music, but transcended familiar music. Then I saw beings. They were very far away. One of them moved toward me very quickly. When she came close enough, I recognized her. She looked much younger than she had looked when she passed over. I believe at the time of the beginning of the change called death, those nearest and dearest come to welcome us. I have been with dying friends who have stepped over, and I remember well how they talked to the loving ones on both sides, as though they were all right there in the room together. So I thought my time had come to step over, and I greeted her. I either said or thought, "You've come for me?" But she shook her head. She motioned for me to go back, and just at that exact moment, I ran into the railing of a bridge. The vision was gone. Because I felt guided to do so, I groped my way down that snowy embankment and got under the bridge. There I found a large cardboard packing box with wrapping paper in it. Very slowly and clumsily, in my numb condition, I managed to get myself into that packing box, and somehow, with my numbed fingers, I managed to pull the wrapping paper around me. There, under the bridge, during the snowstorm, I slept. Even there, shelter had been provided, but provided also was this experience. Had you looked at me in the midst of the snowstorm, you might have said, "What a terrible experience that poor woman is going through." But looking back on it, I can only say, what a wonderful experience in which I faced death, feeling not fear, but the constant awareness of the presence of God, which is what you take right over with you. Wow, that's a lovely summary of just all the things we would hope for. You know, this notion of being able to find peace in really a terrifying situation for a body-mind, to be able to stay out of your panic and to be able to stay in the presence with that, and then to have the beloved show you, you know, yes, there's more beyond this. There's beautiful comfort and light beyond this. But then to send you back, but give you a box. You know, and this is one of those things that I sat with in Colorado quite a bit. You know, whatever. It was a beautiful experience for me in Colorado, and I learned a lot from it. So I talk very fondly about it. But one of the things was being out of a monastery. And, you know, for 25 years before I went to Colorado, the monastery fed me, clothed me, kept me warm, kept a roof over my head, took care of me, right? I had nothing to worry about. And when I stepped out of the monastery, it was a real test because I didn't take any funding with me. Of course, many of the devotees stepped in after I got to Colorado, and that's what supported me through my time there. But it was all done without any asking, without me having to go around and beg, just because of the beauty of God and his devotees. But that notion, of like not knowing where your money is coming from, where your support is coming from, not knowing when it's going to arrive or if it's going to arrive. I realized that to surrender to God means you surrender to the bridge. And there were a few times where I did some meditations where I thought, okay, what happens if at the end of this month I don't get, there's no rent? What do I do? And I said, well, you just go on. Just like I thought of Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar, when he got kicked out of Dakshineshwar by accident. He didn't mutter a single word. He was walking to his room with his hand towel from taking a bath in the Ganges, and he was notified, go, you have to leave. You're being thrown out. He threw his towel over his shoulder, turned around, and walked out the gate. And of course, by then they'd figured out they'd made a mistake, and somebody came running after him to get him to come back again. But it wasn't even as if it was unusual for him. He just threw his towel over his shoulder, turned around, and walked off. If God took care of me here, God will take care of me wherever she's taking me. It's that kind of faith. And I love that. But to have that kind of faith, it's not, it might be that you test God. You might test God and think, I wonder if she will keep me warm tonight if I just walk outside and keep walking, right? And the fact is that there's no guarantees of anything. When you trust God to be God, right? You trust God to be God, and so God may take you. He may freeze you to death in the middle of the field and take you home. And that would not be a failure on God's part, right? Because your surrender, your trust in God is a surrender to God. And so, I often laid there in my bed. Of course, I was in my warm, cozy bed, imagining myself under a bridge. So there's a little bit of tweaking to my practice there. But I was sitting there thinking, if I was under a bridge right now, I would still be me. And I would still have all that I have within myself. It would be fine. Fine. I sleep under a bridge. I sleep here. Right. And so we work ourselves into that practice. And to read this is so inspiring to me, because here's a woman who threw her entire self into God, threw her entire trust into the beloved. And the beloved takes her to the edge of death, seemingly, where she has a vision, and then tells her to go back and provides her a place, a box with some wrapping paper under the bridge. I think that's beautiful, because her contentment in it is beautiful, and her feeling that it was a blessing is beautiful, and the fact that she has racked it up as her best experience is beautiful, because you see it is only her love for God that could make that experience beautiful, right? It's her love for God that made that whole experience beautiful, that gave her that trust and gave her that faith and gave her that calmness and allowed her to learn that lesson in such a beautiful, beautiful way.
Maharaj, I remember that few years ago I was hiking on my own and
Ah,
I really got lost and my cell phone was like totally out of charge. So I was terrified. I mean, I was really terrified in that situation. And again, it was getting very dark.
yeah.
So I mean, I can just imagine like it's very terrifying situation if you're going, that fear of unknown comes very strongly in that time.
Yes, I mean you're exactly right, because not only was she alone and in the wilderness, but it was snowing in a major snowstorm. It was freezing cold, and she had no one else to turn to. But you just see in her whole account here, just no fear, and staying in the presence.
Wow.
That is amazing. I mean, for me, it takes a colored butterfly catching my eye and I'm out of the presence, like, oh, butterfly. It's wonderful to see this kind of faith, to see this kind of establishment in a normal person, not a person that we're reading their name in a scripture, but a person who's just did what they thought they needed to do. So I find this just delightful, and I think this kind of companionship with God and faith in God is very mature, because God didn't give her a bed, it didn't give her a hotel room, it didn't give her a heated, anything. It's like she suffered. There's no doubt she suffered through this. Her hands and her feet were freezing cold to the point of death. But in nowhere does she curse God or say, "Why didn't you take care of me?" Or, "Why aren't you keeping me warm? Why aren't you doing? Why aren't you? Why aren't you? Why aren't you?" You see, because she doesn't have that question. She's surrendered, and she knows that it's going to be fine. And so she never asks what, where, why, how. Even climbing into a box of wrapping paper under a bridge in a snowstorm, she still believes and knows the presence is with her and everything is fine. Regardless of conditions or circumstances, everything is fine for her. That is amazing. This is beautiful, really beautiful. I believe I had a great privilege of experiencing the beginning of the change called death. So now I can rejoice with my loved ones as they make the glorious transition to a freer living. I can look forward to the change called death as life's last great adventure. They're talking that language again. That great adventure of death, right? I told you guys about that guy I met in the hospital. That was his thing. He was 27 years old. He looked exactly like me, which is how we knew each other, or how we were introduced to each other. And I sat on the bed with him and dying of AIDS, actually. And I sat on the bed and I told him, because of that camaraderie of looking exactly alike. I remember just telling him, I was like, God, if I put myself in your situation, I can only feel extreme fear. How did you manage? How have you managed? And he said, well, I've been in here for a few months, he said, and I've had a lot of time to think. And he says, now they think I have about 2 weeks left before I die. And he said, in thinking about it, I also was terrified at the beginning when I was first admitted. I was very scared. And he said, but sitting here, I realized that in all my life, I've always had sort of an idea of what was coming. And I've always loved extreme sports and adventures. And he said, but all of my adventures, there was always a certain amount of knowing what was coming, and a knowing that it was going to be fine. And he says, but now, he says, I realize I'm going on my first real adventure where I have no idea what's coming. And he said, I've never been more excited. He says, I'm looking forward to it in that spirit, to go on this adventure and to see this newness. And so to see here the Peace Pilgrim having that exact same attitude, I can look forward to the change called death as life's great adventure. Right? And so what a healthy and beautiful way to face this unknown, because of course we realize we never die, but it doesn't change the suspect that we're going to die. Oh, where am I now? Yes, okay. I've been asked what I mean when I've said I've started the process we call death. Of course, the change called death is a process. First, you begin to perceive not only this side of life, but the unembodied side of life. Then you begin to recognize loved ones on the unembodied side as they move toward you, and you find you can communicate with both sides. That's as far as I went. Next comes the breaking of the silver cord, and then communication with those on this side is cut off, although you can still see and hear them. You find yourself in the common meeting place with your unembodied loved ones for a wondrous reunion, And later you go to the level where you are to learn and also to serve if you are far enough advanced. The unembodied side of life is right here in another dimension. The two worlds intermingle. We are aware of our world, but they are aware of both worlds, usually. Some communication is possible, for instance. We can pray for them, and they can pray for us. Death is a beautiful liberation into a freer life. The limiting clay garment, the body, is put aside. The self-centered nature goes with you to learn and grow on the disembodied side of life, and then returns here into a suitable clay garment and a suitable circumstance to learn the lessons we need to learn. Could we but see a bit deeper into life, we would grieve at birth and rejoice at death. If we but knew how short is earthly life in comparison with the whole, we would be less troubled with the difficulties of the earthly life than we are troubled with the difficulties of one of our days. The memorial service should be a joyous farewell party, recalling the good the person has done, reading favorite poems and singing favorite songs. If we did this, the liberated one would be rejoicing with us. As I accepted the change of the golden hair of my childhood to the reddish-brown hair of my youth without regret, so I also accept my silver hair, and I am ready to accept the time when my hair and the rest of my clay garment returns to the dust from whence it came, while my spirit goes on to freer living. It is the season for my hair to be silver, and each season has its own lessons to teach. Each season of life is wonderful if you have learned the lessons of the season before. It is only when you go on with lessons unlearned that you wish for a return. What are your thoughts on that? Anyone have any ideas? Or
It reminds me of the passage from the Gita, from the Bhagavad Gita, where he says the death is nothing but as the body, as you shed off the torn garments, so you shed off the body and then take on a new one. And he says, for people who are born, death is sure to come, and for people who die, birth is sure as well. But the torn garments was exactly what she's talking about in terms of the clay garment.
right, yeah, just I can only imagine, because when you sit and think about potentials of the what do I want to say here? What I'm saying, if you take a look at what could be possible, and then you look at what we have to deal with being stuck in this body, right? This body is so clunky, it's so inefficient in its ways. I mean, the way that we communicate, as I learned from that experience that I had, that we take the contents of our minds, which can be full of color and light and wonderful insight, and all we can do is make these funny sounds to try and share that with somebody. And that somebody gets these funny sounds, and then they project all of their own stuff on those funny sounds. And it may or may not have anything at all to do with what you told them, right? Because that's the way we communicate. It's the only option we have, is to try and encapsulate the contents of our mind into a few warbling sounds and pass that on to another person, who then takes it and projects all of their own stuff on it. And so no wonder there's war. No wonder there's fights. No wonder there's misunderstandings, in this world, because we're stuck in these clunky bodies, trying to make the best of it, really, to make the best of it. And so when she talks about the soul going on to a freer life, yes, of course, how frustrating it is for an infinite being to not be able to reach beyond his fingertips, right? Have any of you, this is just a goofy question, but I tried it not too long ago. Kind of embarrassing to admit, but I tried getting something to come to me from across the room. I was joking when I did it, but it turned from a joke into sort of an earnest. Let's just see, maybe this works. And so, my coffee cup was sitting over on the other counter, and I asked the Lord if He would hand it to me, and I reached out my hand, and I just sat there looking at the cup, waiting for it to come off of the table and come to me. Why? Because I'm an idiot. But I was just interested. I thought, what if this is true and it's just because I've never believed it, never tried it? Maybe God is willing to hand me my cup of coffee. He seems like He certainly would. Why not? Right? The beloved. And so that I don't know if that's worthwhile or not, doing like that, but it's sort of what she's doing. It's like you don't know. And so you just kind of keep putting that foot in front of the other in faith. It's like, yeah, this is going to work out no matter how it works out. Whatever it comes from it is going to be perfect. This is going to be something. And even in the face of all kinds of conditions that she could have complained about, she found contentment. And she found the beauty of presence, right? And was fine. On religion. Religion is not an end in itself. One's union with God is the ultimate goal. There are so many religions because immature people tend to emphasize trivial differences instead of important likenesses. Well, there's a wonderful sentence right there. Look at that. There are so many religions because immature people tend to emphasize trivial differences instead of important likenesses. Differences between faiths lie in creeds and rituals rather than in religious principles. How diverse the many paths seem to be at times, but do they not all come together eventually upon the same mountaintop? Are they not all striving for the same thing? If you are guided toward faith, use it as a stepping stone to God, not as a barrier between yourself and God's other children, or as a tower to hold you aloft from others. If you are not guided toward a faith, or even if you are, seek God in the silence. Seek within. When we attempt to isolate another, we only isolate ourselves. We are all God's children, and there are no favorites. God is revealed to all who seek. God speaks to all who will listen. Be still and know God. That's wonderful. I love that notion there of immature people, and that's not a derogatory way of speaking. Just people who are just beginning will overemphasize the differences because in the beginning, the rote stuff is what you're dealing with. How to pray, how to worship, how to talk to God, how to, how to practice. What am I supposed to be doing? And so all those things, and those are different from religion to religion, right? But what those things are trying to accomplish is the same in every religion. The principle of love. Love is the one most important thing in every religion that I've even glanced at so far in my life. And that should be enough to unite us. That should be enough for all of us to see the unity of religion, the fact that all of them are steeped in love. Right? All of them are steeped in grace. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian church telling me that that Christianity was the only religion that had grace in it. That all the other religions worked by works alone. Right? What a surprise to me to grow up and find out that was utterly untrue. That every religion, the final step in all religions is grace. The final step in all religions is grace. Right? All of us come home because of the love of the divine, because of the beloved. And this is beautiful here too. If you are guided toward a faith, use it as a stepping stone to God, not as a barrier between God and God's other children. So if you join a religion, you're in that religion for union with the divine. So keep your eyes on the divine. That's how that religion is practiced. You don't get in the car of that religion and then look out the windows at everybody else who's not in the religion and then judge them, right? So what she's saying, if you're going to be a Christian and keep your eyes on God. If you're going to be a Hindu, be a Hindu. Keep your eyes on God. If you're going to be a Muslim, but keep your eyes on God. Don't sit there and start comparing yourself with everybody outside the car window, right? Everybody in a different religion from you. That's not the point of religion. That's not the function of religion. That's not the help of religion, right? The help of religion is pure love. And so we keep our eyes on God and we follow our principles and we keep going forward. And those principles, because they are formed out of love, will be encouraging to everybody's journey forward, right? And will be a strength to us. I am a deeply religious person, she says, but I belong to no denomination. I follow the spirit of God's law, not the letter of the law. One can become so attached to the outward symbols, to the structure of religion, that one forgets its original intent, to bring one closer to God. We can only gain access to the kingdom of God by realizing it dwells within us, as well as in all of humanity. Know that we are all cells in this ocean of infinity, each contributing to the other's welfare. I read the King James Version of the New Testament in its entirety, and some excerpts from the Old Testament just after the beginning of my pilgrimage. They are important books to a great number of people, and I felt the need to inquire of their contents in order to make my outreach to others more complete. Yes, the Bible contains a great many truths, but most often these truths are not really understood. People replace the spirit of the law with the letter of the law, and truth becomes distorted into a falsehood. If you desire confirmation of a truth, it is best to seek it from within and not from a printed page. You will note that Jesus says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" He expresses this thought more than once. Therefore, it seems to me that a real Christian would be living by the laws of God that Jesus taught. Jesus also says, "Say not, lo here or lo there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you." In so many illustrations, he tells people what they are capable of. Real Christians would allow their lives to be governed by the kingdom of God within, by the God-centered nature, which is sometimes called the indwelling Christ. Many people profess Christianity. Very few live it. Almost none. And when you live it, people may think that you're crazy. It has been truthfully said that the world is equally shocked by one who repudiates Christianity and by one who practices it. I believe Jesus would accept me because I do what he told people to do. This doesn't mean, though, that all who call themselves Christians would accept me. Of course, I love and appreciate Jesus, and I wish Christians would learn to obey his commandments. It would be a most wonderful world. All right. While all of that may be true, and certainly all of us feel those things at different times, it's not really to anybody's advantage to say them. Right? Because what this does is just reading this here, to say that very few when many people profess Christianity, very few live it. Okay, I have felt that, and I have thought that, but I'm not sure that we should say that out loud, because somebody who doesn't know Christians then is going to approach them with a negative disposition when they do, and that's not going to be helpful to them. Right? That's not going to be helpful to them. And so these things, it's always better when you talk about religions to keep it between you and God. right? Keep it between you and the beloved, and let love guide you in everything else. You know, everything external. If you stay in the present, it's going to work out fine. If you stick with your Satchit Ananda as your inspiration, you'll be all right. If you start sticking to your thoughts and reasons and opinions, you're going to get in trouble real fast in this world. That's the nature of it. But she's going to take us on here now to the way of love. She says, evil cannot be overcome by more evil, right? You don't know how many times I've had to use that in the last months. Right? You watch the news, you just get provoked inside, right? And you catch yourself thinking terrible thoughts, you know, of just going, I can't believe what's going on, rah, 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 you know. And so you want to go out and scream and yell and get violent about it all as well. And evil can't be overcome by evil, right? It's overcome by love. It's overcome by love, and we still have to see that response at this current junction in time. Although I would say that in Minneapolis, when those marchers were singing those beautiful songs, they weren't being violent, and they weren't insulting, and they weren't belittling. They were singing truth, you know, and holding a space that was very important. So that's a beautiful thing, you know. And I think that that's our way of facing the crisis in America, regardless of how you view it. Your role in it is going to be the same. Love, you know, love. We've got to confront this, not by confronting it, but by creating our own destiny, by creating our own vision for what life is going to be for us. Right? And so we go out and we make that happen. We go out and live according to our principle of love one another, you know, our principles of grace. And if we make it through it, if this country survives this little test, then we will have done well in learning love, right? We would have done well in sticking to our principle, our original principles. You know, a land of the free, a melting pot of the world, a land of opportunity, right? All the things that were at one time very true. And so we hold on to our ideals, and we remind ourselves of our ideals, and we insist on living our ideals. We won't be defeated by this. Evil cannot be overcome by more evil. Evil can only be overcome by good. It is the lesson of the way of love. The contest in the world today is between the old way of attempting to overcome evil with evil, which with modern weapons would lead to complete chaos, and the way of overcoming evil with good, which would lead to a glorious and mature life. We need not reach out to tear down that which is evil, because nothing which is contrary to God's laws can endure. All not good things in the world are transient, containing within themselves the seeds of their own destruction. We can help them to fade away more quickly only insofar as we remain in obedience to God's law, that evil must be overcome with good. Those who create something which is evil in order to overcome something else which is evil only double the evil. God's laws are implemented constantly, for everything out of harmony is on its way out. How can anyone doubt that eventually God will prevail? It is only how soon that is up to us. And with how much violence will pass away is also up to us. Insofar as we are willing to let them go, there will be less violence. Insofar as we have been able to build the new within the old, there will be less violence. So let us work on that. Let us help the phoenix to rise from the ashes. Let us help lay the foundation for a new renaissance. Let us help to accelerate the spiritual awakening until it lifts us into the golden age which would come. In order to help usher in the golden age, we must see the good in people. We must know it is there, no matter how deeply it may be buried. Yes, apathy is there. Yes, selfishness is there. But good is also there. It is not through judgment that good can be reached, but through love and faith. Pure love is a willingness to give, without a thought of receiving anything in return. Love can save the world from the nuclear destruction. Love God. Turn to God with receptiveness and responsiveness. Love your fellow human being. Turn to them with friendliness and givingness. Make yourself fit to be called a child of God by living the way of love. Very beautiful. Do you know God? Do you know there is a power greater than ourselves, which manifests itself within us as well as everywhere else in the universe? This I call God. Do you know what it is to know God? To have God's constant guidance, a constant awareness of God's presence? To know God is to reflect love toward all people and all creation. To know God is to feel peace within, a calmness, a serenity, an unshakableness which enables you to face any situation. To know God is to be so filled with joy that it bubbles over and goes forth to bless the world. I have only one desire now, to do God's will for me. There is no conflict. When God guides me to walk a pilgrimage, I do it gladly. When God guides me to do other things, I do them just as gladly. If what I do brings criticism upon me, I take it with a head unbowed. If what I do brings me praise, I pass it immediately along to God, for I am only the instrument through which God does the work. When God guides me to do something, I am given strength. I am given supply. I am shown the way. I am given the words to speak. Whether the path is easy or hard, I walk in the light of God's love and peace and joy, and I turn to God with psalms of thanksgiving and praise. This is what it is to know God. And knowing God is not reserved for the great ones. It is for the little folks like you and me. God is always seeking you, every one of you. You can find God if you will only seek, by obeying divine laws, by loving people, by relinquishing self-will, by relinquishing attachments, by relinquishing negative thoughts and feelings. And when you find God, it will be in the stillness. You will find God within. All right. We're going to stop there for today.